I think it's so crazy how um, everyone kind of has this stigma, especially with the FAI, where it's like, oh, it's this structural thing, and nothing can fix it except surgery. And then you actually totally prove the fact that a huge part of it is just muscular related. And when you
Yeah.
see it as that, you realize it's actually a lot easier to manage on your own, and obviously gives you amazing results, but also with your actual jiu-jitsu, because you're going to get way more flexible. So yeah, 10 out of 10 recommend.
You sent me a message on Instagram a little while ago sharing how you had some bad hip problems and you found some of our YouTube videos and the TSR system. And so I'd love to hear, just paint us a picture. Like, what were your hips like when they were bad? And then
Yep.
what happened and how are they now?
Yeah, so initially it was quite gradual. It definitely started probably around 2012, just with really mild symptoms, like stiffness, reduced range of motion. Um, and I just kind of thought, oh, it's probably just because I'm not stretching. I'm sitting at a desk. I was a uni student at the time, studying physiotherapy actually, and I remember getting to a point, I reckon a year later, where I started to notice, particularly my right hip, which is the one that had the labral tear and would click, and that was like a new symptom. And so anyway, so around 2014, I was doing a training camp in Brazil, and I was in Brazil for like a solid month. And I remember towards the end of that training camp, I started to get that catching pain, that like textbook symptom of the labral tear. And it was so ironic because what we were covering at the time was pathologies of the lower limb in physiotherapy. So it was like, oh, this is like exactly like straight from the textbook what I've got. And it was real shit because it would catch, and I just wouldn't be able to move. I would have to kind of wait until I would basically be able to like fire the muscles in my hip again. And it turns out, I remember, shortly after that trip going to see a physio for it, and she said that that sensation you get is basically the muscle inhibition from the pain at your hip. So definitely didn't get better from then on, and I just remember thinking, oh, what am I gonna do?
And that's a
Because
big
I
problem.
was,
That's
yeah,
a big problem if you're a
it's a huge
jujitsu
problem.
athlete.
Exactly. Especially because, a huge part of my game is playing off my back, playing guard. And that's like, it really requires a lot of dexterity in your lower limb, especially your hips. So, that was obviously an issue. Um, yeah, so I just remember kind of going down that rabbit hole of like, how do you fix a labral tear? And obviously, the first thing you see is surgery. And it's really daunting because you look at the outcomes of surgery, and it doesn't seem to be that good. I saw so many like really poor testimonials of surgical outcomes, and it does boil down to the fact that they're potentially, after the surgery, things might be good. You have like addressed like the symptoms initially, but because you haven't addressed those root underlying causes, eventually at some point those symptoms are going to return. And a really funny, well, I mean, it's not really funny. I mean, it's just something that kind of proves that point. A good friend of mine back home who was actually trying to go professional in soccer, he had that exact same injury, and he got the surgery done, and he never really got his hip better. Anyway, so I ended up thankfully stumbling across your YouTube channel. And what was, you don't really come across many people in the online world that kind of give you enough just from like YouTube, like enough free stuff for you to get by. But thankfully, I was fortunate enough, and I guess as well fortunate enough that I was able to be proactive enough and put enough time into like doing the rehab. But yeah, fortunate enough that I had enough to work with just from. But yeah, started off with very basic myofascial release, and I guess obviously with each different case, it's going to be different for everyone. A huge thing for me was releasing uh, glutes, adductors, and TFL, and then going into mobility work. I started off with a lot of static stretching, trying to relax. Played around with some like loaded progressive stretching, like the kettlebell dumbbell stretch, which is actually a video that I saw you do. And eventually, the pain started to go away, and the range of motion started to improve. And I don't know, it just went. It was like textbook, as you described with your system, which is really awesome. And the really cool thing I noticed, and this is something that I've told so many people, passing by in conversation who talk about hip pain, but they kind of don't realize how legitimate it actually is, which is a shame. Um, but I very vividly remember in one of my university placements, one of our supervisors in our musculoskeletal placement, he was talking about how like movement dysfunction, so which in most case is lack of range of motion, seems to have this real high correlation with pain. And in my case, that was 100% true.
Wow, awesome. And so
Yeah.
how are your hips now? You're a full. Are you a physical therapist and a jiu-jitsu athlete, or what do you do?
So I actually the moment I finished my degree, I actually just went full time into jiu-jitsu. Um, and I've just still been doing that since end of 2016. Yeah,
Nice.
but my hips now are totally fine. I I don't get that pain. So the injury was in my right hip, um, and I would still say my left hip is more flexible, but my right hip it basically has the same yeah, the same range of motion as the left hip, which is awesome because rewind a few years back and it was totally not the case, and there was a lot more pain involved. I definitely like can't even appreciate. I mean, I definitely do, but I can't even remember how bad it was back then. Yeah,
So cool.
it
And you sent me a comment on Instagram when we were chatting in the DM, and you said that now you're known as the bendy guy, like in your jujitsu circle, which is
yeah
coming from a labral tear and immoral hips to now being the bendy guy, which is kind of the same as me. Like I was always super stiff, and then I was that guy in the gym doing the splits and a bunch of flexibility. It's amazing what
yeah
progress you make with consistency and with the right tools and the right kind of comprehensive approach. It's not just stretching, as you mentioned. There's some tissue release work that's helpful along with that. But
mm,
it's awesome to hear that you've kind of gone from the inflexible guy to the bendy guy. And now people are. It sounds like maybe people are asking you for advice or help about how to get
yeah
that.
yeah. It totally is the case, and like I was getting, I kind of got to a point where I had a lot of people asking me, and I was just like, you guys should search Got Rom on YouTube, so find the Shane guy. He's literally going to give you all the tools. Actually, the other day I compiled a playlist for someone of your videos to watch. And actually, come to think of it, one of the girls that I was training with back in Melbourne, um, I think she had like I think it was FAI. Yeah, she had FAI, and she had the surgery, and eventually she ended up getting a program after I referred her to it. And she said that she was getting a lot better as a result. I mean, I just found, especially with my background of my degree, everything that you were saying was just making so much sense, and I really liked that analogy with the whole tissue quality before stretching. I think it was the analogy of the tight rope. How if you have a knot in the rope and you stretch that rope, it's still going to continue to you know tighten those knots.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. I've
yeah,
I've personally found this isn't necessarily the case for 100% of the people across the board, because usually everyone's a little bit different, but I have found that the tissue work plus the stretching is much more potent and much more powerful than just self-massage alone or just stretching alone. And I find that it's a big missing piece of the puzzle in modern rehab and physical therapy programs for FAI. They're still in the model of like strengthen and stretch. Like those are the two
Yeah,
pillars. And to me, they're missing one major pillar, which is not just foam rolling. We're not talking about a generic massage or just a gentle foam rolling, but getting into the nooks and crannies of your hips with,
yeah,
then they're going to
that's so
stretch,
true.
then they're going to strengthen better. And the three pillars, that TSR system, that's why I think it's a powerful combination. So I'm glad it worked out for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, and the one thing that I found was really interesting and also really important was each of those three pillars are like a skill that you actually develop. So like I can remember the first time I tried to do like glute tissue release with like a spiky ball. Actually, I got this is the one that I use here, and compared to now, I'm so much more skilled at actually doing the release. Like I know exactly where the spot is, and I know how to find the spot. Whereas the first time, I wasn't 100% sure of what I was looking for, and things like that. And same with stretching as well. Like stretching is a skill. Obviously, the first time you do it, you're not 100% sure like what cues, what you're exactly looking for. And then obviously over time, you are a lot more in tune with your body and how to basically do it really.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. That I couldn't agree more, because sometimes I'll hear people say like they've never done any stretching in their life, they've never done any self-massage, they've never really done much, and then they start trying it for the first time and they give it a shot for like a month or two, and they're like, "Well, I didn't really notice anything after a month or two of, say, foam rolling or something like that." And I'm
Yeah.
like I wish I could put my brain into your brain and tell you that there's so much more depth and profundity that you'd be missing if you just said, okay, that entire category, that like all massage doesn't really work for me, or all stretching doesn't really work for me. In my mind, it's like a 4-year college degree. Like tissue work is a 4-year college degree. You could go study tissue work, tinker, massage on your body, and after 4 years, you can say that you have a bachelor's degree. You have a basic understanding of self massage. Because
So true.
yeah, it's like I know from experience that like when you learn how to really get into there, say like the glutes, for example, I can make my hips go from feeling like, oh my God, like something's really wrong in here and I'm going to need surgery. And if I just release this one trigger point in particular in the glutes, all of a sudden I'm like, my hips are completely normal. It was just a trigger point. Like, how is that even possible? It felt bone on bone. It felt like something was grinding. It felt so wrong that it was so easy to convince myself that I needed something really drastic to fix it. And really, it was just a deep, deep, deep trigger point in the piriformis or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's so crazy how um, everyone kind of has this stigma, especially with the FAI, where it's like, oh, it's this structural thing, and nothing can fix it except surgery. And then you actually totally prove the fact that a huge part of it is just muscular related. And when you
Yeah.
see it as that, you realize it's actually a lot easier to manage on your own.
Yeah.
And I mean the skills that you develop along the way of the rehab, I think it is quite life changing. I'm so happy I didn't just kind of throw in the towel and get the surgery done,
Yeah.
because I probably would have recurrent kept on getting the surgery because I wasn't actually addressing the main issue, which was the muscle tightness.
Yeah. 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 Again, well said. It's not our stance, which I keep trying to reiterate, because sometimes people we think that surgery is never appropriate and it's never a bone problem and it's always the muscle. And you should always work on it with stretching and self massage and movement re-education. But it's not, I'm not an extreme guy like that. I don't think in black and whites. I think in a spectrum. And I just
Yeah.
think that the pendulum has swung too far in the direction of, it's always a bone problem. It's mostly a bone problem, and you can't do anything unless you change the shape of the bone. Even the prevailing theory is bad bone shapes cause labral tears, and if you don't fix the bone, you're never going to be out of the labral tear. And what you said at the beginning of this conversation is that you have a labral tear, but you worked on the muscles and you kind of came out of your problem. So the point is just to try to swing the pendulum to a more balanced perspective, which is bones matter and muscles matter, and muscles and movement matter probably more than the vast majority of people are giving them credit for. And so focus on that first because it's less invasive and less expensive. And for the percentage of people where really you deeply explored tissue work and stretching and movement reeducation, and it didn't take you all the way there, no problem. Then you know that those aren't the things for you. But you only know that after you've maxed them out, after you've dived into all of them, and then you can start considering a surgery and changing the bone shapes. But it sounds like the muscles and the movement reeducation took you where you wanted to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably what the majority of people with, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, obviously, but I think that's probably what the majority of people experiencing those symptoms would find. Another thing I found quite interesting was like the whole lifestyle related factors. Um, like if you look at my lifestyle before I started training jiu-jitsu full time, and obviously not everyone wants to, train jiu-jitsu full time, but I did notice, going from a full-time uni student that would spend, like anywhere between 4 to 8 hours a day at a desk to suddenly training jiu-jitsu full time, that shift in lifestyle also helped a lot with the symptoms as well, because I wasn't confined to a chair for prolonged hours of the day.
Yeah, and that's super important. That's often people focus on what are the exercises that I need to do, which stretch is going to fix me, which massage is going to fix me, which surgery is going to fix me. And yes, they talk, it's in the common consciousness that sitting's not so great for your body. It's not so great for your hips, but really analyzing in an intelligent way and looking at your lifestyle systematically to see what things are helping or harming your hips, and then systematically going about changing them is super important. And it's really great to hear that you not only did the massaging and the stretching, but you stepped back and looked at the broader picture of your life and what do I need to change about my sitting habits, and because that's really helpful as well.
Oh yeah, totally. Like I said before, I'm super grateful that there was someone like yourself, putting out content, and again, it's that kind of outside the box kind of approach. And to be honest, I mean, like with your approach, it was a very logical approach, but it just so happened that not a single physiotherapist or orthopedic surgeon happened to kind of put these on the table.
Yeah, and that's
Which is a
that's
shame.
yeah, that's why we started doing it in the beginning. It wasn't it was out of my partner Matt's personal struggles with this thing. And we tried all the conventional things that were available at the time, the yoga, the physical therapy, and things like that. And I happened to stumble upon some different, unique, weird ways that are not conventionally taught. And so if you just look around at what the options are on YouTube, on Google, and physical therapy, like I spent 25 some $1,000 exploring different modalities, and I didn't encounter some of these exercises in most of those places. And so we kind of felt like compelled to, and that's why I have so many free videos on YouTube, because I don't see that information out there as much. It's getting more and more popular these days with mobility, and people are teaching mobility, but specifically with femoral acetabular impingement, hip impingement, we found that there was a big gap that needed to be filled. There was a big missing. So I'm glad you're taking advantage of it. I'm glad that you're helping other people in the BJJ community. And if there was anything that you could say to anyone who's similar to you, a BJJ athlete or a grappler or martial artist or something in your category who's dealing with hip problems, what would you recommend to them to help that?
Oh, 100%. If they could just start off with going onto your YouTube channel, and I mean, those videos that you put, I think they were a while back, like 2012 or 2013. I can't I vaguely remember the exact dates, but looking at those real basic introduction to like the FAI fix, I think that is a really good spot to start off with. Because like I mentioned before, that whole system, that like systematic approach of dealing with the tissue quality, stretching to improve the range of motion, and then the re-education aspect, I think that is like such a like important process to go by, and it helps so much with the pain, and obviously gives you amazing results, not in terms of like outcome of the injury, but also with your actual jiu-jitsu, because you're going to get way more flexible. So yeah, 10 out of 10 recommend.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Appreciate you taking this call. Appreciate you reaching out to me on Instagram, and appreciate the work that you're doing to help your brothers and sisters in the BJJ world who are also dealing with the same things.
Oh, no worries, man. Thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Thank you for having this call, and talk to you again soon.
Cool. See you around, Shane.
All right, brother. Peace.
Bye.